what gets under my skin, Erin, is when leaders act like employees are stupid, right? Like we see the smoke coming out of the chimney. We hear the alarms are going off, and then you come and tell us there's nothing to worry about. There's
Right.
nothing to see here. You may not know why the smoke is happening. You may not know why the whistles are going off, but just acknowledge that, right? Say, hey, I know you've smelled the smoke. I've smelled it too. I don't know exactly what's causing that, but once I do, I'll let you know. That's gonna like feel better and keep that trust there than pretending that, yeah, we didn't just do a reorganization. Yeah, we didn't just lay off half the team. Let's humanize. Again, people are human first and colleagues second.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know, it's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy, it's comedy, it's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hi, my friend, Erin here, coming to you with another great interview. Today, we're talking with Minda Harts, and she's a best-selling author, a workplace consultant, an award-winning filmmaker, also a keynote speaker, and she talks about trust in the workplace and has something called the 7 trust languages. And before you're like, oh, that sounds so fluffy, just wait a minute. We talk through specific scenarios, tips, we get tangible, everything from how do you build trust with that new employee that used to be your peer? Or how do you ask the right questions in an interview or in a one-on-one with your employee that helps you understand what's important to them regarding trust? And so how do you operate differently so that you don't keep eroding it? We also talked about how do you give better feedback while building trust. And so we just went through all these different scenarios and also used her trust languages as a foundation. So if you're ever wondering, like, how do I, for example, I just messed up something big time for my boss or my client and I'm so stressed out. Well, you need to listen to this episode because there are some bombs, some little shifts, some questions that are so powerful that I wish I had them back when I was leading bigger teams. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Minda Harts. I'm fascinated by your background because, I'm like, oh, yeah, she's all about trust. She's a speaker. And then I'm like, oh, wait, she's a professor. Oh, wait, she's a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And of course, she wrote books and did all of that stuff. I'm curious, to talk about trust, which I know you talk about other things, but there's a passion you must have because it's a not super sexy topic. But what was there a moment or a story that really solidified that obsession?
Yeah, actually, the obsession started during COVID, when I was in the house, and at the time, I was living in New York City. I moved to LA a few years ago, but I, woke up at, 3:00 in the morning, and I just started hearing this voice saying, it the issue is always it's just trust, and I didn't really, think too much about that at the moment, but when I got done using the bathroom, I wrote it in my notes, trust languages, and then I just put it in my phone, and then periodically I'd come back to it, and the more I started to think about, all the writings I had done over the course of, several years, the real problem I wasn't really solving for the problem I thought I was solving for. Trust was the issue, right? So when in the workplace, when certain things are happening, what's underneath it is this expectation that's not being met, and it's eroding the trust. But oftentimes, we don't know that we're doing that with people, right? So then I started to uncover it's less of a trust issue and more of a communication issue, right? Because if that person knew you needed this, could that get trust back on the tracks, right? And so I started just obsessing about how do we rethink trust on a day-to-day basis, because in relationships, it's a no-brainer, right? if I can't trust you, then I don't know if this relationship is going to work, right? But
Yeah.
in the workplace, we kind of give people a pass for doing things that are not trustworthy, right? And we never have
Yeah.
conversations about it. So that's what like led me down this like trust train.
Yeah, and so you've got I love the languages. Everybody thinks of the love languages and
Yeah.
you've got these trust languages. There's 7 of them. Where does it start? Do you really need to understand the other person, or are you like there's these 7 trust things that you need to do?
Well, my thesis is that we all have a primary, secondary, and tertiary
Mm,
language, right?
yeah.
And there may be a time when we're speaking all of them, but if I'm the leader and you report into me and I know that I want to get the most productivity out of my entire team, not just my go-to people, right?
Yeah.
In our next one-on-one, I'm going to ask the colleague, what does trust look like to you? I want to make
Mm,
sure that we have the most harmonious working relationship possible. I want to make sure that you get the most out of everything on this team. And what does that look like to you? Because, Erin, what's going to happen is you're going to tell me 2 or 3 of these trust languages without really knowing what they are, right? So if I know feedback is important to you or I know transparency is important to you, I'm going to make note of that. And when we're working together, I'm like, you know what? Erin values when I'm more transparent, right? When I'm not being ambiguous, when I'm not
yeah.
talking from up here, or I provide feedback to you in a meaningful and insightful way, right? I'm not just
Yep.
giving it to you and, you fill in the blanks of what that means or it's your first time hearing about it because I tell people it's about the like double E's. We're either enhancing trust or eroding trust.
Yep. Always going up or
So,
down.
yeah. So let's figure this out, right? Because it's possible. We may not be able to solve for everything at work, but we can solve for respect, right? We can solve for trust.
That question's so powerful. I mean, I used to lead tons of employees, and I'm like, crap, if I could have just said simply in one meeting, even if it's not the first one, hey, I'm
Right.
curious. Like, trust is important. What does trust look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, think about what that would I never had a manager, not because they didn't wanna have trust with me, just because we're moving at 90,000 miles per hour in the workday, and you're not kind of thinking that, "Oh, there's a human on the other end of this. They're
Yeah.
probably wanting something," or, the data shows that if we have more trust, then we're 21% more productive. We're 74% less anxious. It's like, I want my team to be less I don't wanna be the reason you're spiraling through the day and
Right.
not know it, right? Not know
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, or imagine if you could, you're trying to attract the best talent and you ask that in
Yeah.
an interview, like even front load it even further. Like, you think people aren't the best talent's not going to flock to you? Please
They're gonna be
repeat.
like, "Wow, I've never heard that," and I even write about it in the book. I'm like, ask certain questions in the interview process to see if you know that you are a person who needs acknowledgement, ask those kind of questions,
Mm,
in the interview process because it's if someone that you're working with, it may not be their, like, first go-to say, "Hey, great job, Erin. Thanks for the project you delivered in Q4. I don't know where we'd be right now without it." Somebody is that's not the language that they are most comfortable with giving out that, but you may need that just to survive and thrive inside the workplace. So why don't you tell me that's what's important to you and, advocate for yourself so that again, I know because we're not always going to work for the person that's going to ask you what does trust look
Sometimes you got to take those bull by the horns.
Yeah.
And by sometimes, I mean all the time.
Yes,
I
most of the time.
I love that. So most of our listeners are leaders, but let's be honest. They're also listening selfishly as somebody who's being led, as an employee. Let's
Right,
just
right,
be
right.
totally honest. I mean, everybody wants to
Mm.
be a great leader. I think that's a great question. But to get more selfish, I think that's a great angle. So maybe talk about those different languages. And can you pick a couple of them and give an example related to if you're going into an interview and you want to test out, but also proclaim like what's important? What are some questions you would ask?
Yeah, I would probably ask what would be maybe sensitivity, right? Because I think right now one of the most important trust languages in the workplace is having empathy, being mindful of our actions, our tones, and our behaviors. If I were an interviewee and I would just say, many people work together in the workplace, but they experience that workplace differently. If I were reporting into you, and there was a natural disaster inside of where I'm working from, and I wasn't able to get into the office 3 times a week or 5 times a week, um, is there any flexibility? because I live in a wildfire zone. And,
Mm.
that's something that's really important to me. And I just want to make sure that there are resources or we can have conversations to help make that a little more easier if those things happen, something like that, right?
Yep,
And
yep.
that would tell me what type of manager this is. Someone who says, absolutely. Wow. Were you impacted by the fires in LA last year? I know that was probably really tough, right? You get to kind of see, or if
Mhm.
somebody says, I don't know, maybe you should move to San Diego, where because we need somebody in the office 5 days a week and get to that local Starbucks and get that hot spot because we need you on that quarterly call, right? I
Yeah.
know that sounds a little facetious, but you'll start to kind of see like how people humanize you, right? How
Yeah.
people, or are they just kind of robotic, and you're going to need somebody who is empathetic because, the likelihood of something like that happening could be big, right? Or just
Yeah.
something as simple as we're in a meeting and somebody says something that's inappropriate, right? We've all been in a situation where somebody says the joke that's not funny to everybody, right? Do you sweep that under the rug and let that person continuously say those type of things in team meetings? Or, if I have an issue, would I be able to bring that to you without kind of fear of retribution? Because I find that a lot of trust is eroded in those big team meetings, right? Because
Mhm.
people are speaking over each other. People are saying kind of anything that, inappropriate, not because they are just saying, hey, I want to be inappropriate today, but they're just so used to just kind of talking any kind of way. And I think it's important that people have that psychological safety, which is another trust language of security, right? Again,
Yep.
it's important to, even if we have a difference of opinion, that there's still enough respect for me to be able to come and have a good conversation with you that enhances instead of erodes, right? And I think that's like a two-way street. If you give someone feedback, when what do they say? Oh, I've never heard that before, right? Or do they
Yep.
say, you know what? Let me consider what you're saying. Tell me more about this. Let me ask some questions instead of getting defensive. And I just think that these are ways that behaviors that keep showing up in the workplace, and we don't realize how detrimental they can be to the people that work with us.
Yeah. And everybody's different. Back to the leader hat. Like, I'm just sitting here thinking of 2 people that support my business. They couldn't be more different in terms of one of them is more on the sensitivity side. I know that it's important for her, like, if something gets messed up, that I make sure I'm like, "Dude, no big deal at all." Or,
Mhm.
when things are done well, like, I make sure I don't blow smoke, but I say the thing that's inside. A lot of
Yeah.
times we feel inside, "Oh, wow, they crushed it," and then I don't say it. The other person that supports my business is as far from sensitive as you can imagine, and so I'm looking at your list, and I think things like probably follow through because she
Mhm.
is my operations person, so it's more of like, "Okay, Erin, you said you were going to send me 3 videos, like, send me 3 videos." Which I'm not always good at, but, just understanding those people, I think, is really important. What, um what are things that people the rebuild trust? That's always a big one,
Mm.
and I'd love, to pick the use case of actually, like, a client or a customer, because I think that's sometimes the most scary, maybe boss too, but
Yeah.
let's say you've screwed up something with the client, with the customer, or on a major project and it's an internal customer. What's some tools, tricks that maybe they've never thought of that makes it simpler to, enhance that trust?
Yeah, I think that's a great, great question. I think the trust language demonstration, because that's do our actions align with our values, right? Because I can tell you all day that I'm going to make sure that I make the tacos the way that you expect them to be made every time you come to the taco truck. But if every time you come to the taco truck, they're made differently, that's not demonstrating that you can trust that this is the place that you can go to. But what I will say is when we do make a mistake, we can acknowledge that, oh, you know what, we have a new cook, we're training them today, but we
Mhm.
value you as a customer. And then the next time you come, or even in that conversation, oh, you like your cheese sprinkled instead of um uh hardened
Shaved
on the
or so yeah,
yeah, on the shell
whatever.
and so whatever it is. And now that I know that, and you've been a loyal customer, I want to demonstrate. I want you to trust that this is the same taco truck that you've been coming to for the last 7 years. So the next time that you come, I'm going to take a look inside the bag, make sure that cheese is sprinkled before you get your order. I'm demonstrating that to you, right?
Yeah.
And then the next time you come, I'm doing the same thing. It's the show and the tell, right? And
Yep.
I think it's a lot of times in all of our lives, we want to quickly skip over the repair part. I said, I'm sorry, move on, right? But it's the demonstration over time, right, that
Yeah.
shows you that you can trust me again. And I do believe if trust can be broken, it can be rebuilt, right? But we have to, if it's not egregious, right? But I think it's important to demonstrate that, and that leads to another trust language too. Now we're being uh, bilingual, right? You're going to follow up on those things to make sure that people still trust you. Because at the end of the day, we all want to be seen as trustworthy, but it requires an action. Trust is a noun and a verb.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it takes patience is what I'm hearing too.
Yeah.
I've never really thought about it. When we mess up, we want that instant gratification. We want the open wound in our heart or on our leg or in our mind to be
Yeah.
healed, right? Maybe in a big corporation, it's like we'll give you a fee holiday. We want something tangible that's quick. Um, but I think if you slow down and go, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable for a little while, but holy cow, next week when I, go to that meeting and I above and beyond some report or they're going to be wowed. And I think sometimes it's harder to have that patience, but it's more impactful, right? Like the taco truck, like
Absolutely. Yeah.
it takes patience to hope that they come back to the car, right? And to the truck. But when they do, you're gonna to your point, you're both eroding and enhancing. You're gonna skyrocket that enhance so much more if
Absolutely.
you're patient and focus on demonstrating. I love that.
Also, I think giving people that opportunity, right? Because if we've been
Yeah.
burned in our personal or professional lives, sometimes we already go in with our blinders on, we go on with our defenses up. And so you may be the best boss I've never had yet. But if I'm still holding on to hurts and broken promises in my last situation, then I'm not going to get the best out of the situation with you, and you're not going to get the best from me. So I also think internally we have to be emotional and emotionally intelligent, but also self-aware to say, okay, is this person really eroding trust, or is it me that's bringing in some of this baggage from past experiences, right? So I think it's important for us to also kind of look at ourselves and
Mhm.
assess, is this a
Sure.
little PTSD, or is this really happening in the way I may think so?
Right, right. It's easy to tell those stories, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the boss is mad at me because I got a 3-word email. It's like, nope, the boss is running to another meeting and is actually not worried about the mistake you made. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthentic.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authentic.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too. Let's say you screw something up big with your boss, mess up a report, screw up some technology, lose a customer if you're customer facing. Specifically your boss, right? That's such a strong sort of hold on making sure we impress them and we keep
Hmm.
the trust and the satisfaction high.
Yeah.
What are some tips there beyond just like, yes, okay, you can demonstrate and you can get the report right in a week or two. Anything else?
if you're in a position of leadership, what do you ask? But I would also say the same thing on the other end, right? Because they're
Mhm.
human too, and they
Yeah.
have expectations that you may not be aware of, right? Or maybe you do. And if you're new on the team, even you may not have had the same tenure that some of your colleagues have to know, well, you know what, Gina, she really values demonstration, or she values follow through. Like if you don't get those things done at 5, then she's creating a list, up for you, or she's putting you on the list. I think it's important to ask. I'm new to this team, or we've been working together a very long time, and I know that expectations change depending on priorities, and I just want to make sure that we're aligned, right? Because I really enjoy working on your team, and I want to make sure our relationship is, top tier. What do you need from me to do
Mhm.
your best work, right? And because we look at it,
Mhm.
success is not a solo sport, right? And so asking those questions, and again, they may not say transparency, or they may not say sensitivity or security, but they're going to say something that gives you an idea that, oh, you know what, transparency is really important to them, or acknowledgement is really important. And so I'm going to take that as a mental note and make sure that, okay, if I say I'm going to do something at 5 and I can't, I'm also going to follow up and say, hey, I know that deadline is approaching. Could I get an extension on 1 hour? I'll get that to you shortly. That's still keeping trust on the tracks, because I didn't just workplace ghost you, right? When I see you in the hallway, I'm going the other way, right? I think sometimes, again, going back to what you said, we create these narratives in our head that people are going to be
Mhm.
so upset with us and this, and people just want you to be honest, right? And
Yeah.
that's part of trust. Like we're all bump up against a deadline. We all make a mistake, right? That's what this thing is about, but it's how we communicate that, right? Again,
Yeah.
it's less about trust being the issue, and it's the communication piece. And I think so often we get that wrong with each other.
Yeah.
Because we dismiss things. Not again, I don't think anybody shows up to the workplace and says, "Who can I road trust with today?" I don't think we do that. But
Yeah.
in our emails, in our tone, our behaviors,
Sure.
sometimes that happens, right? And we want to make sure that we're just doing a check, a temperature check.
Yeah. Totally. What gets under your skin? What's your leadership biggest pet peeve? What's the biggest thing that leaders do wrong that's so simple that you wish they'd change?
For me, I really value transparency, which is having clarity and honesty. And what gets under my skin, Aaron, is when leaders act like employees are stupid, right? Like we see the smoke coming out of the chimney. We hear the alarms are going off, and then you come and tell us there's nothing to worry about. There's
Right.
nothing to see here. You may not know why the smoke is happening. You may not know why the whistles are going off, but just acknowledge that, right? Say, hey, I know you've smelled the smoke. I've smelled it too. I don't
Mhm.
know exactly what's causing that, but once I do, I'll let you know. That's going to like feel better and keep that trust there than pretending that, yeah, we didn't just do a reorganization. Yeah, we didn't just lay off half the team. Let's humanize. Again, people are human first and colleagues second. And I think sometimes because leaders think they can't be honest, right?
Yeah.
Because they're privy to certain information, then say that. I don't have all the information right now, but I understand how this might make you feel, right? And if you have any other questions, book some time with me and let's talk it through. That's gonna feel better, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to, I just saw my work wife get laid off last week. She's been here for 10 years and now we don't even talk about it, right? We just move on like nothing has happened. And I I
Yeah.
I think sometimes leaders forget what it's like to sit on that other side.
Love it. I love the quote. Stop thinking your employees are stupid. I mean, right there, right? I mean, the bar is
Right.
low, isn't it, Minda? Like,
It's so
it's
low.
so low, like, just bring it up a notch and you're already a good manager. You're not a great manager, but you're good, right? So it's so bad. I saw on a post you did, that at a keynote, I think during a Q&A, somebody asked you a question, I'm not sure what it was, and you sort of like the gremlin that came out that you blurted out was, Don't outsource your humanity."
Yes.
What what caused that, and what did you mean?
It was a little gremlin that came out. So somebody had asked me about the use of AI, right? And how we
Mhm,
communicate with each
mhm,
other. And I told them that I think it's important that we use the tools that are available to us. But when you are engaging with people, what starts to happen is I put my thoughts into the agent, and then I email you or whatever, and then you put your thoughts into an agent, and now you're emailing me, and we kind of take ourselves out of it, right? So
Right.
now it's these two agents that are talking to each other. There's no nuance. They don't understand the history of what happened in the meeting. They're just kind of getting it from one angle. And so I'm saying before you press send, just because it's direct, just because the grammar is great,
Yeah.
don't outsource your humanity. Take a second glance at that email before you send it out. Think about the nuance. Think about the relationship, right? When they finish
Yeah.
this email, how are they going to feel? What's the relationship going to feel like, right? But if we're just two agents talking to each other, now we're not even building trust. We're eroding it. And there's some things lost in translation. And so that's when I said, don't outsource your humanity, because I think sometimes when we use these tools, we take ourselves out of it, right? We're just like, oh, it's done. Press send.
Preach into the choir, girl. I'm an authenticity girl. Sounding smart is now suspicious. Stop sounding smart. I've always hated people that tried to sound smart, but now it's extra suspicious. Um, can we talk about giving tough feedback, whether that's in an annual review or on the fly? I think the whole sandwich thing is over, right? Like maybe that was cool when we didn't know you were being sandwiched with the good
Yeah, yeah.
feedback, the tough feedback, the good feedback.
Mhm.
Now, anytime we hear it, I think we have PTSD. What's the Minda Harts, build trust while giving that transparent feedback? Any tips there?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do when someone books me for a talk, one of the options is this game that I created called the Trust Catalyst, and that teaches people how you have these conversations better, right? So
Mm,
that you don't erode trust. So, for example, if you are coming in and we're doing a one-on-one or we're doing a year-end review, I'm not going to start the conversation by giving you a bunch of feedback, right? That's not the
mm,
first trust language I'm going to go to. You sit down, or I see you on the Zoom screen, and now I just start saying, that report that you did last week, I really wished you had used Claude Cowork. All of the, I'm giving you this feedback. And so you're like, oh, I didn't know that this was a problem. And that's where you're starting with. So when you
mm,
start there, how do you think that this meeting is going from there? And so when you think of the 7 trust languages, think about them as tools. If you have a nail, you're not going to grab a wrench
mm,
first, right? You're
mhm,
going to get the screwdriver to get it out. And so maybe you start the conversation with a different trust language, right? Acknowledgement, or you're being sensitive because you know that this person has had a rough year, right? So
mhm,
I'm not going to just launch into feedback. And when I do get to feedback, I'm going to make sure that it's meaningful, make sure that I'm giving you opportunity to grow from this, right? Because it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? So I can still tell you hey, we got to meet these deadlines a little bit better. Is there something that you need from me so that we can make sure that you hit this mark 3 weeks from now, right? And so it gives them an opportunity. We value you as a member of this team, and I wanna make sure that you're having a good experience and that we're not missing the deadlines that are impacting other people in the department as well, right? And I
yep,
wanna be here to help you and coach you along the way. That's gonna feel different, right?
mm,
Than now I'm fearful that I may not have a job at the end of the week. And so I think it's
right,
important,
right,
again, the double E's. Is what I'm about to say to this person going to enhance this relationship? I'm thinking about, what do I want the end of this conversation to look like, right? Do I want you
mhm,
to feel down and out and now you can't wait to cut that camera off, Or is there a way that when you see me later in the next meeting that we still are vibing, right? And I
yeah,
just think that people forget, again, there's two ways to say things. I always say that with my mom and dad growing up, they could say the exact same thing to me, but when my dad said it to me, I wanted to spiral down the wall, right? Because his delivery was just very like harsh. But my mom could say the same thing, and I would accept that. I would listen, right? I would
mhm,
take that feedback in because I knew she was telling me this in a way as a way for me to grow, right? And I think that's something as leaders and colleagues that we could do better job of.
yeah, I love that. I have one more scenario that I think is, um, fairly prevalent, and it's a sticky one. The situation is when your peer becomes your employee, right? You get promoted, and inherently, Joe, who used to be your sidekick and you were
Yeah.
confidant and you could tell everything to, is now your employee. How do you how do you build this new level of trust with somebody like that where your relationship is changing?
Yeah. Ooh, that's such a good one because I think that happens. And I know that sometimes that can be sticky depending on what end of the
Right.
friendship you're on.
You think?
Yeah. Say part of that is being transparent, right? Let's talk about kind of the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I know that we have this great working relationship, but now I'm in this leadership position. So there may be times when I have to put certain priorities first, but I want you to know that you can always come to me. I hope that we can have two relationships, right? Our working relationship, but still continue with our friendship. But there may be maybe times where I have sensitive information that I can't talk about as before, but I hope we can find that balance and, let's be honest with each other. I would prefer to be someone have a conversation and be
Go right at
transparent
it.
with me and create that
Yeah.
sense of security instead of pretending that I don't exist anymore, right? Or just like being weird with me. Cause I think just having the conversation and 9 times out of 10, if people just communicate instead of being like conflict avoidant, I think that we could have better relationships. But again, we're creating this narrative that this can't work or I don't know how this is going to. And it's just like, let's just talk about it, right? Let's
Yeah.
talk about how this works. And if it ever gets to a point where you don't feel like our friendship is still there or I'm acting different because I'm in this new role, then tell me that, right? Let's work on
Mm,
this. I value
I
that.
love
And
that.
I think that that's important. And we just have to say what we mean without being mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, say the thing you're gonna say to your coach
Yeah.
or your partner or somebody, you probably already say, "Oh, it's a little awkward, but did it." Why not say that to to the person?
Yeah.
Get it out
I
there.
have that information, right?
Yeah.
And now I know because I may be thinking everything is fine, but you may feel like, oh, I used to talk to this person every day. Now I don't talk to them only once a month. And so you're assuming that now that I have this big title and leadership role that, I don't care as much. And I'm just really busy, right? And I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about that. And I think, again, some of these things are just communication issues rather than trust.
Yeah. Um, I'd be remiss not to also talk about you haven't just focused on trust to help empower women of color. You're a filmmaker, and part of that is to empower, I think, other women and talking about real life situations and friendships and things like that. And I mean, gosh, everybody that listens here is always also one trying to make work suck less, but also looking for that inspiration to do things that maybe feel uncomfortable, feel outlandish. Can you tell us a little bit about the filmmaking side and for those people that are like, oh, maybe I could also chase some wild things that I'm thinking about?
Yeah. Well, I never intended on being an author. I just kind of fell into it. And so I would encourage people that, they say you can't teach a dog new tricks. You can.
Mhm.
And one of the things because I love to write, during the pandemic, I started taking screenwriting classes because I knew at some point, Erin,
Mm,
I wanted to be able to take the stories that I've been telling or
mm.
other stories related to, trust and relationships and just all those beautiful things that make our days more beautiful and complicated and talk about those in a different medium. I wanted to be a better storyteller and I'm a big advocate of investing in yourself. So rather I win an Oscar or, a Webby, or nothing. I wanted to be able to enhance that. And so when you're thinking about business, I also was thinking about the IP that I have and how I could tell those stories in different mediums. And so
Mhm.
I started to take those classes,
Oh,
6 years ago. And so I knew at some point I would do it. And then I just said, you know what? I'm not going to wait on, the green light from somebody else. I'm going to green light myself. And I started making my short films. I started continuing the coursework and reading books and finding my crew on social media and asking people around. And now I'm 4 short films in, many festivals. And it feels good to be able to tap into or uncover a new area of my life that I'm good at. And again, maybe I'll win some Oscars in the future, maybe I won't, but I'm enjoying this piece of my life because it's another way to get stories heard from people who may not ever read your books.
I love that. And I mean, you said something so simple at the beginning. You're like, I took a class. Like so many times we're like, but I don't even, there's a class for everything.
Everything,
Just
everything.
just take the class, grab the
Yes.
mentor, grab the coach, take the online
Listen,
whatever.
I, I'm a,
Just get curious.
I'm
Take the
going to
class.
tell you, and your listeners, a secret. For the last since I was a teenager, I've always wanted to take piano lessons. And I kept telling myself every year as I got older on the vision board, take the piano lessons, take the piano. And I never did, right? But today, as we're recording this, later today, I'm taking my first piano
Ah,
lesson. Now I may never. I might be in a recital with the preschoolers later, but this is for me, right? And
yeah.
I just think sometimes we just have to do things for us.
Oh, I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. Okay, two final questions. We always ask people about their buck that story. So it's a time when you sort of bucked the norm and went against the grain, but good things happened as a result. Do you have a buck that story that you might be able to share?
Yes, really quickly. It's where I sit right now. It's the intersection of where I sit. I was in corporate America for 15 years and I started this dinosaur thing called a blog in 2015. And I was frustrated about the workplace I was in. There was no trust anywhere. Couldn't find it outside if I even tried to. And I started this blog, and that was a way of me to talk about what I was experiencing in a way of not woe is me, but if anybody else is feeling this way or can't have certain conversations, here are the tips that I wish I would have used or that
Mm,
I'm working through, right? And so I created this memo. So every Monday I'd put out this memo in 2015, and eventually all of those memos became my first best-selling book called The Memo. And I had no idea. And now I'm on book 4, right? And making films. And so sow those seeds, take the step. And I left a very stable job, and I was scared, crapless because I'm type A. I love stability. I
mhm.
didn't have a lot of it growing up, so I'm like, I'm here. Give me the gold bear. Give me the watch. I'm here forever, right? So to take that leap and bet on myself, and buck the system and say that success isn't one way, and I think I'm a constant buck that girl. Like,
Yeah.
that's just how I live.
Yeah. Once you buck it once and it works out, that's the end of the story. And that's why we love to share those stories for those people
Yeah.
that are feeling, they're holding themselves back. I love that. That's so cool. All right. Before I ask the final question, where can people find you?
Yeah, so go to mindaharts.com and all my socials are there. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so follow me, shoot me a message. And then on my website, you can also find the portraits or go to Google Portraits. And Google really loved the 7 trust languages, and they thought, it would be a great way to help people think through how they communicate better. And so I partnered with them to do this trust coach version of myself where you could put in different scenarios and we talk it through. And I really love it because it's just another tool to be able to, you may not get me on the phone right away and we get to talk about these trust issues, but you can lob it into the trust coach and it's fun. I'll even go there sometimes and talk to myself. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I can see that.
yeah,
I can see that. I love it. Last question. What's your one last tip to make work suck less?
that's a great question. I wish I was asking myself that many, many years ago, but I think the one thing is, what is it that you want out of work? Right? And I think sometimes we do things at work to make it work for everybody else, but we never consider what
Mm,
does it look like for us. And so once you understand what you need, then you could ask for what you need a little bit better, not what the person in the cubicle next to you or on the Microsoft Teams wants, but what is it that's really going to make you say, this was worth the ride, right? And I
mhm.
think we should remember that we're good enough to deserve the best workplace possible.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. So nice to share all your wisdom with our listeners. I appreciate it so much. Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.